Do you want to know how to buy a house, add the most value and sell for a great profit at the end? I am going to share with you our exact process for buying, refurbing and selling to maximise those returns. So what is house flipping? House flipping is buying a property you can add value to. You can create a lovely home for somebody by doing a refurb and to create good profit at the end. It's not buy to let. It's not BRR, because in this instance, we are selling the property. When you're looking to do a flip project, you want to be looking to get around about a 20% return on profit. That means you have to get your numbers right. You need to know how much you're going to spend on that property. You need to know what the done up value is, and therefore what you can buy it for. How do we choose the right property? Because we want to add value, we are looking for properties that are below value. We're looking for properties where we can do some work. That means we can add that extra value to make the profit. So the amount we spend on doing that work has to be less than the profit that we want to make. We are trying to find properties that maybe have been on the market a long time. Maybe those vendors are desperate to sell because the deal has fallen over. If you see properties that have gone under offer and come back to market, they are perfect, but they need to have work done. That is where you are adding the value. You also want to buy in the right area. Buying in a rental area is probably not going to maximise your return, because then you are likely to be selling to an investor. So you're not going to get the best price. You want to be buying in an area where people want to live. Places where there's good transport links, where there's good schools, where there is high demand for people wanting to live there. Because that will give you the best opportunity to have the maximum number of potential buyers at the end, because time is money. We don't want to be sitting on this property for a long time. We want to get in, do the work, get it sold. We want a quick return, and that means we have to appeal to the most number of people. Now, if you think about buyers as a pyramid, at the bottom, you've got your first-time buyers. So, if this is your buyer triangle, down here, you've got first-time buyers. There's more of them. They're easier to sell to. They're not in a chain. They can get a help to buy. They can get better mortgage rates. So, first-time buyers is that maximum pot of potential buyers for you. Next up, you've got your movers, your second-time buyers. So this will be your families. Then people moving up. They've got promotion, they can afford a bit more. They're moving to those better houses. At the top, you've probably got your millionaires. There's far less of them. And the higher up the pyramid you go, the more likely your buyer is going to be in a chain. Now, it's not a problem, but it can delay things. Therefore, first-time buyers are a great target market. It's good because you need less money to get into the deal. You need probably less on the refurb because it's a smaller house. And you've got more people looking to buy when you've completed. So this is the area that we target the most. The other thing is, don't buy extremes. You don't want a house that's already had most of the work done, because you're not going to be able to add much value. Therefore, you're not going to make much money. You also don't want a wreck. If you look to buy a wreck, then you risk all sorts of unseen issues, and the cost of that refurb is huge. The bigger the refurb, the more problems are potentially down the line. So maybe come to that when you're a bit more experienced, but even then, why not have a simple life? Find the properties in the middle. So you want cosmetic flips. You want flips where you can do an easy refurb. We want to be putting in new kitchens, putting in bathrooms, carpet, paint, change the look of the property so that when people come in, they get the wow factor. That doesn't mean that you have to be spending a fortune. You may want to reconfigure the property, but it's not always essential. Now, one of the best flips we did was, let me think, about 18 months ago. We bought the property for 112,000. It was actually on modern method of auction. So the property price was 105, but we had to spend 7,000 on auction fees. It was a 2-bed semi. We then, it had been gutted because the person before us had gutted it. They weren't living there, they were renovating it. They'd been left the property in a will, and then that person died. So it was kind of like a double probate. The people who had inherited the property just wanted rid. They didn't want anything to do with it. So we managed to negotiate a really good price. We were lucky because we didn't have to do a lot of the rip out because it had already been done. But some of the layout was a little bit odd. There was a downstairs toilet kind of in the middle of the house, which was weirdly located. And it was a 2-bed with quite a big bathroom. Now this property we made into a 3-bed. So we were adding value just by adding a bedroom. And it was an easy fix. We moved the bathroom and just put another wall up. It wasn't a big job. We spent about 35,000 on that refurb. That meant we put in the kitchen, we moved that downstairs toilet to under the stairs, we moved the bathroom to where the small bedroom was, and we built another wall, which made the property a 3-bed property. We then decorated, we put down carpet, put down nice banister to attract people, and we also rendered it outside because it was a little bit ugly. We changed the outside a bit because curb appeal is really important. If people don't like the look of your house when they come to view, they ain't buying. You've got to appeal to them. We also just did the garden, just laid turf, put a few shrubs around, nothing massive. We sold that property for 195,000. Make that so you can read it. There we go. 195,000. That meant we made a profit of about 45,000. Now we were in and out of that property. Time is money. The minute we completed on that property, we had guys in there doing the last bit of rip out and getting started on the work. We actually did all of the work in the space of about 10 weeks. The thing that took the time to completion was the legalities of the sale. And that's just something you have to run with. But if you can get that refurb done quickly, then you're going to make more money. Holding costs are a factor. So when you hold something for too long, you're adding to your costs. So what do we need to take into consideration when we're looking for a deal? What numbers do we need to analyse? We need to make sure at the end we are going to make a profit. You can't just think, I'm buying that house because it looks cheap and I'm going to refurb it and hopefully I'll be okay. You need to know what your numbers are. So start off with what we call your done up value, your DUV. That is how much you should be able to sell that property for in the future. How do we find this number? We look at what's happened. We look on other places like Rightmove, Zoopla and StreetCheck to see how much similar properties have sold for in good condition in the area. Now we don't want to go too far back because the market prices change. So ideally you want something in the same postcode, or at least within a quarter of a mile, that is a similar property, same number of bedrooms, similar standard to what you're going to achieve. And 2 or 3 properties, because that will give you an average of that done up value. If you're struggling with that, talk to local agents. Say to them, I'm looking to buy a house on this street. I'm going to refurb it to a high standard. How much do you believe we could sell that property for? What is the demand like in the area? And who are the buyers? What type of people? What do they like? What are they looking for? Because this property isn't about what you want. It isn't about what you like. It's about what the buyers want. Because if you tick that box and you get that right, you're going to make the most money. And let's be honest, that's what we're all here for. So once we've got our done up value, we need to work backwards. We always start with the end in mind. So as I said here, done up value. We then need to know what we're going to spend on the property. Make sure you view the property. Have a look, see what needs doing. Know what standard you're aiming for based on that conversation with the estate agents. Remember, if you are in a normal area, terraces, semi-detached houses, it is unlikely that you are going to need to put in gold taps. We don't want to be over-speccing. It's very, very easy to get carried away with a refurb where we get excited about how it's going to look and we want it on the front of country living or whatever, and we spend too much money. Because then you don't make any. And we're here to make a profit. So we need to do things that give the wow factor, but they don't cost too much. So work out your refurb. If you're unsure, then think about taking an experienced person with you. Maybe ask a builder if they can go with you. Now, you may have to pay them some money because at the end of the day, you're taking them away from earning. You need a good handle on what that refurb is, how much it's going to cost you, because things will cost more than you expect. You know, if you need to do a rewire or put central heating in, they're big jobs. They're going into the walls. So you're going to have to plaster. Things have knock-on effects. If you're going to do kitchens and bathrooms, try and negotiate trade discounts. Go to trade suppliers, tell them you're a property investor, and can you set up a trade discount? Because you don't want to be buying things retail. Get trade discounts, you get more profit. So work out how much these things are going to cost you. You don't necessarily have to put in the top range kitchen. The first and second range kitchens are perfectly adequate. They're perfectly functional. They look good. Choose a colour that's modern. Choose a colour that's going to attract your end buyer. So work out what that refurb's going to cost you. So let's just say our done up value here is 200,000. And let's say our refurb for everything we've talked about is 40,000. So now we're down at 160. But there are other costs we need to factor in. We're going to have to pay solicitors. We're going to have to pay a surveyor. If we're buying on a mortgage, we're probably going to have to pay a mortgage broker. Now, we'll come back to whether you buy on a mortgage in a minute, but those sorts of things, those fees, you need to factor in. Let's allow about 2,000 for those fees. Now, one other thing that we do need to factor in is stamp duty. So I'm going to come on to that in just a second, because the other thing is how much profit do we want to make? Now, on this house with a £200,000 end value, I would be looking to make somewhere between 30 and 40,000. Now, ideally 40,000, but 30 is okay. So let's aim for 40. Now we're down at 118. We're going to have to pay stamp duty. It's a second home. That means we have to pay 5%. 5% is going to be 5,600. So now we have a figure of 112,400. This is what we can afford to pay for that property to make this kind of profit. It's really important to do this kind of calculation to get down to what you can afford to pay. Now, I haven't included here other factors like cost of money and holding costs, which really we should take off. Holding costs are things like your council tax, your utilities, those things that you're going to have to pay. You'll have some insurance because you need to make sure that property is insured as an empty property. You don't want anything going wrong and then you've lost all your money, make sure you're insured. And cost of money is the percentage interest that you are paying to whoever is lending you the money to buy the property, which means this figure may come down to something closer to 105k. But work those figures out. If you overpay, you're not going to get so much profit. You might be lucky that the market moves up. There's always the risk it might move down. Your refurb may not go quite according to plan. And that means you need to build in some contingency. Because if you discover something unexpected, you've got to afford to pay for it. So always build in something like a 10% to 20% allowance for contingency. But the one thing that's missing off there is what happens when you come to sell. You've also got legals, because you need a solicitor to do the work for you. And you've also got estate agent fees. Oops. Estate agents may charge you a fixed amount. They may charge you a percentage. Find out what kind of costs your local agents charge. Legals for selling is usually a little bit cheaper than buying. So maybe allow about 1,000 on your legals. Your estate agent, it could be 1%, it could be a fixed fee. Allow around about 2k on that kind of property. So at the end, there's 3 grand that you are going to lose off your profit for those fees. Again, make sure you take them into account when you're working out your purchase price. When something's on the market, that doesn't mean to say that is the price that you have to pay. We negotiate. Now, you will find that there are vendors selling their houses on Rightmove, etc., who have various reasons for wanting to sell. Some fancy a change. They're happy to sell. They're not really bothered when they sell. If they get the offer that they want, then they'll start looking for something that they want to buy. They are not motivated sellers. What we want is people who really want to sell. We want people who want to move their property on. They either want to move on because they found their dream house, or they can't afford to stay there, or there is some other reason that they need to sell. They are your ideal sellers. So for example, we bought a property a couple of years ago that was on the market at 250,000. I didn't really want to pay 250,000 for it. I wasn't really looking for something at that price at that point. I liked the house though. We went to view it. I loved the house. And I know you shouldn't buy with your heart, you should buy with your head. But I could see with the right attention, the right renovation, this house would sell quickly and it would sell for a good price. But not buying it at that price. Now the lady who was selling wasn't really bothered. She'd inherited the house because it had been her brother living there who had unfortunately died. She'd already inherited from the house once because it was her parents' house. And when her mum and dad died, she got half the money and her brother got half the money, but he stayed living there. So she'd already had money out of the house. When her brother died, she just really wanted rid. She wasn't that bothered. We had a survey. There was a bit of potential subsidence. We ended up negotiating to buy that house for 170,000. Quite a good discount on what it was listed for. That meant we then could go forward. The refurb on that property, it was a 3-bed house. It had quite a lot of character, had a decent garden. So, but in the main, we didn't do a lot other than that cosmetic refurb I told you about. We put in a new kitchen. We moved the kitchen to a different room, made it a big open plan kitchen diner, put in patio doors so you could get out onto the garden. The lounge, we dealt with the damp and decorated. What was the old kitchen, we made into a utility room and a downstairs toilet. Upstairs, it was 3 bedrooms. We left it as 3 bedrooms. We could have done an extension, which would have made it 4. But it was so difficult to get any kind of materials, any deliveries to be able to do that work at the back of the house. It just wasn't practical. It would have taken too long, it would have been too costly. So just because you can doesn't mean to say you should. It was a single, separate toilet and bathroom, so we knocked them into one, redid all the bathroom, decorated the bedrooms, and like I say, put the new kitchen in downstairs. We spent around 50,000 on that property. So we were in, excluding fees, we were in for 220. We sold that property for 315,000. That was a great return, but that was because we kept the refurb to where it needed to be cost-wise. It's because we bought at a price that would work for us. We knew what the potential buyers would want and we made it to fit their needs. And we had several people offering on that property. So that worked really well. So how did we get this £170,000 offer accepted? Well, to start with, when we viewed it, we actually put in an offer of 190. At that point, 190 we thought would work, and it was, yes, still a lot of a discount, but because the seller was motivated and they wanted rid, they were happy with that. It gave them a good return. We then got the survey done, and the survey showed damp under the front window, severe damp, I mean like bubbling damp, and it also showed there was some potential subsidence because the front path around that front window had cracks in it. It looked like it was a bit unstable. The reality was, actually, it was a tree root and it hadn't affected the house. But at that point, we didn't know that. Therefore, we went back to the vendor and we said, negotiating through the estate agent, we said, because of these things, we really can't go above 170. So she came back and she said, well, 170 is the lowest I'm dropping. Okay, that's cool. We're good with that. let's go. So it was a relatively easy negotiation. But when the vendor is motivated, that negotiation is so much easier. It's hard if they need a certain amount because they've got to pay off a mortgage or whatever. But generally, if that seller wants to move on, then they are more open to negotiation. And that's what's happened here. Next thing though, how do we pay for this property? Because sometimes that's the thing that stops people. I can't do that. I haven't got enough money. No, I'm going to have to save up. How long are you saving for to buy a property? Need to find a way to buy the property and get going now. So how do we fund flips? Now, not that many people have got that amount of cash sitting in the back pocket or sitting in the bank to be able to just go buy a property and pay for the refurb and the fees and everything else. So we need to find a way to finance it. Now, there are various ways that you can finance. Some people talk about a mortgage. Really, you shouldn't use a mortgage to buy a flip. The reason being, the mortgage is a product designed for properties you are going to own and hold. Lenders lend the money, either interest only or capital repayment and interest, and you pay it off over an amount of time. For the lender, they don't make much money in the first year or two. They don't start making money until you get past that point. Therefore, they don't want to lend you on a mortgage if you're going to be out of that deal in 6 to 12 months. They won't like it, and you don't want to upset them if you're going to be buying your own properties down the line. So what do? We can either get bridging finance, where that is short-term finance allowing you to buy properties like a flip. Or we can use private finance, angel finance. In the main, we use angel finance. We work with individuals who want to get a better return on their money. They lend money to our company for a fixed return. And then when we sell the property, we pay them back their capital and we pay them their interest out of the profit. In some cases, we might do a joint venture. And what that means is we have a funding partner. They put in all of the money and we are the managing partner and we run all of the project. And when we sell, we split the profit. Why would somebody do that, I hear you ask? The reason is we're aiming for big chunks of profit. We're aiming for lumpy money. And if you think people are getting relatively low returns in the bank, by doing a JV with us, they might not know anything about property, they might not know how to do it. By doing it with us, with being somebody experienced, they then know they're going to get a better return. But even if this is your first property, you can still do that. You just need to find the right partner, because they will get a better return in a shorter period of time than if they leave it in the bank. That's why some people will JV. But if you're going to go down the bridging route, that's probably the most accessible. But it's also probably the most expensive. Now, if you're going to buy a property on bridging, they may offer you two different options. You may be able to get a percentage of the done-up value, but not always. More common is that you get a percentage of your purchase price. If you're doing big developments, it's different. They'll fund an end value, they'll fund the actual refurb. But when we're doing this kind of smaller level flip, they will fund some of the purchase price, probably around 75% loan to value. That's great, I hear you say, I only have to put in 25%. Not necessarily. So, if your purchase price is 100,000, 75% loan to value means you're going to get a loan of 75,000. That's what the bridging lender is going to lend you. So you think you need 25. However, the way bridging lenders work, is they will probably charge you a monthly interest amount. That can be usually 3/4 to 1% per month. Not too bad, I hear you say. So maximum there, 12% if you've got it for a year. They also charge you usually something around 2% to get in and 1% to exit on top of your monthly fee. Now the cost is building up. What are we at now? We're at 15%. Possibly manageable, but the other bit that most of them do that they don't tell you when you first inquire is all of this interest they take off at the beginning. So instead of giving you 75,000, they're more giving you around 60,000, probably a bit more than that. Let's go 65. Because they've taken all the interest off. Now you thought you were going to get 75,000 and you only needed 25,000 plus your fees. Suddenly you need another 10 grand. So if you are going to get bridging finance, which is fine, make sure you have factored in all of these costs in your figures to work out your purchase price. And make sure you understand if they are going to deduct the interest at the start, that you have got this shortfall. You need extra money. Because nothing's worse than getting close to completion and suddenly finding you're 10 grand short. So be very, very clear what the bridging lender is charging you monthly to get in and to exit, and at what point they take the interest. When you are looking for property, quite often we'll go and look at the auctions as being a good deal. You can get some great deals at auctions. Firstly, make sure you set yourself a limit and don't go over it. But if you are lucky enough to secure a deal at auction, understand how long you have until you complete. Most auctions it's 28 days. With modern method of auction, you can get 56 days usually. But you have to have your money in place. If you don't complete when they tell you, when you have committed to, the charges are huge. The amount of interest they can charge you going over is massive. So make sure you've had this discussion with your bridging lender, that your bridging lender is ready to release those funds on the day of completion that's been agreed with the auction house. Or if it's a private investor, you've got that money in your bank. You do not want to be late on this. And you've got enough of it. Don't have a shortfall. You need to know you've got enough to pay for any shortfall in the lending, the price of the property, any auction fees, any legal fees, all those other factors. So once we've bought the property, what do we do with it? Well, hopefully you've got an idea of what you're going to do with it because you had to work out your refurb budget at the start. For me, this is the exciting bit. I love getting hold of a property that needs a bit of TLC. It needs turning around to become that gorgeous home for somebody down the line. We are taking something from being sad and unloved to being gorgeous and in demand. But we have to do it cost effectively. We have to find the wow factor as cheap as possible without cutting corners. Cutting corners costs money in the long run. We need to think about our design. When we're doing that refurb, I always find that it's good to have a plan, both a plan in terms of schedule of works and a plan in terms of the floor plan, because you want to know how you're going to lay out that property. You want to know how it's going to be used at the end. And if you haven't thought about that, if you haven't thought about your furniture layout, All your plugs and your sockets and your radiators might be in the wrong place. So right at the beginning, do a schedule of work. And a floor plan. The schedule of work will help you with timings. You need to talk to different trades. Now, you might be quite handy yourself and want to do some of the work yourself. That's fine, but remember the time that you're spending doing the work may delay the project, and you're not spending time looking for other projects. So think about whether it makes sense for you to do it or whether you employ a trade to do it. Because that guy who plasters every day is going to do it quicker than you. We want things moving on as quickly as possible. But we need to make sure it's not holding other trades up. So we have to get things in the right order. There's no point getting everything plastered and then thinking, oh, I need to do a rewire, and the electrician comes along and channels out all your new plaster. You need to get your electrician doing his first fix first. If you've got to put pipes in the wall, you need your plumber doing their first fix. So if you're going to do that level of refurb, you need to make sure you get the trades in the right order. When you put your plaster on, you want that to look like an almost finished surface. All you're going to do then is paint it. You need your plumbing in place for your bathroom. You may be able to use existing plumbing. You may have to replace pipes. You need plumbing in place for your kitchen. Where are you going to put the sink? Have you worked out your kitchen layout? Where does it make sense for your oven to go, your fridge, your sink? Because again, you want your electrics in the right place, you want your plumbing in the right place, and you want your kitchen to flow. So when new buyers come in, it feels good, it feels right. So that's why it's so important to think about these things well ahead. Same in bathrooms. Can you fit in a bath and a shower and a sink and a toilet? Do you have to put a shower over the bath? Well, if you have to put the shower over the bath, make sure the tap end is up against the wall, not up against the window. If the bath is the one way round, we flip it, because then you can put a nice shower screen up and it makes sense. It makes the bathroom attractive. You don't have to tile the whole bathroom. Tile the wet areas, tile the shower, tile around the bath. But you can paint the rest of it. It's a much cheaper option, but with a good choice of colour, you can get that wow factor when you walk into a bathroom, because kitchens and bathrooms sell houses. As I said before, you don't need the most expensive kitchen. You need a kitchen that looks nice. Do you want a shaker style kitchen? Do you want a modern slab handleless kitchen? Don't overspend, but see what kitchens are available to you that give that look that you want. We tend to do houses where we have a colour theme going throughout, so it looks cohesive. If we're doing a green kitchen, then we might put green paint as a feature wall. We might do a bit of panelling, but we keep the colour scheme going. Now, panelling is a great way to add a feature, quite cheaply. You can either use MDF panelling, which is pieces of MDF that you put on the wall to create that heavy kind of panelling, or you can get, so that would look like that kind of panelling, or you can get panelling, or you can get literally small lengths of wood that you put on to create that kind of panelling. You just paint it all over. It creates a great feature. People walk in and they go, oh wow. A little bit of wallpaper here and there creates a bit of wow. It's a bit of interest. It's something different. It's not expensive. When we do a downstairs toilet, our kind of go-to design is we do like tongue and groove panelling around the bottom and then a bit of a wow wallpaper on the top. And we do under lighting. Lighting is an amazing way of adding gorgeous wow factors. A shelf with just a little bit of strip lighting underneath that you can buy in a roll. Pretty cheap. But when people see it, that looks amazing. In kitchens, when we put a tap in a kitchen, we'll often put in one of those taps that you can extend and swivel round. We don't go to the extent of putting in a cooker because they're too expensive, but we will get one of those taps that look like they might be one. You can pick them up for 30 quid. You don't have to spend a lot of money They're functional, they work, but they look good. In bathrooms, quite often we'll put in waterfall taps. And the shower, we always do one of those rainfall showers with a separate hose for if you're washing your hair. Again, they probably cost, I don't know, 120 quid. They're not massively expensive, but people see them and the design makes them go, wow, that's great, I love it. So all of these little features are things to consider. You don't need gold taps. You don't need quartz worktops. Maybe if you're doing £1 million house or £500,000 house, yes, you need to appeal to the buyer there. But when you're doing a normal first time, second time buyer house, you don't need to go to that extent. And shop around. Absolutely shop around. Don't be going to your local bathroom specialist. Trust me. B&Q and Screwfix are great. They're absolutely functional and their designs are fine. Buy online, Bathroom Mountain. Equally, you can get some great stuff at really, really good prices. There are very, very few people who are going to walk in and go, that's a B&Q toilet. Most people don't know because what they're seeing is the design of the whole room and that wow factor that you are giving them. The biggest mistake I see people make in flips is overspending. It's buying far too high, say quality, but expensive stuff that it doesn't add anything. The rule of thumb, whatever you spend on something should add double in value. If you spend 10 quid on a tap, it should add £30 value. If you spend 100 quid, it should add £300. You need to make sure you're always looking at the end that you are gonna make a profit. That comes down to what you're buying, your design choices. And back to this floor plan, if you get this bit right, the room will flow. And you won't have to get electricians or plumbers or whatever to do things twice. Do it first time right, because if you have to do it twice, it costs money. When we are selling this property, we are wanting to appeal to owner-occupiers. They're not looking at it as a product to make their money. That's what an investor does. We want them to come in and go, wow, I love this house. I've got to live here. I want it. We are wanting their heart to rule, not their head. We're wanting them to just adore it and need to have it. And they are going to pay whatever it takes to get it. Now, we've talked a lot about the inside and what you do. Let's not forget the outside, because I did say before about curb appeal. If you've bought a house that needs work, then the chances are it also needs some work outside. That might be putting in a new front door. If it's a normal white UPVC door, they're fine. But if you can put in a coloured composite door, that can really add some wow factor. That can make that house pop. Maybe the render looks a bit iffy. Not necessarily in bad condition, but rather than the cost of re-rendering, could you paint it? Could you brighten the outside up to make it more appealing? Going back to that house that we bought for 170 and we sold for 315, we didn't re-render it outside. It had render on it and it was kind of like a grey stony colour and it was really dull and very unattractive. What we did to the outside of that house was paint it all white. We had a black composite door on it. We had black windowsills. The house popped when you looked at it. It looked like a completely different house. But that didn't cost that much in the scheme of things. We tidied the garden. We put a bit of a patio down, but again, we put some flags and we put some gravel. It looked really nice, but it didn't cost a fortune. Gravel is a relatively cheap way of creating good walkways, good patios, without spending a lot of money. You don't have to landscape the whole of the garden. Make sure you've got turf. Mow the lawn. Maybe put the odd shrub in that's an established shrub to give some colour. Or some pots. You can take the pots away with you. You don't have to sell them with the house, but you're giving that appeal. You want people to come up to that house and go, oh my God, this is amazing, before they even get in the front door. Exciting to do all the renovation, to do the design, but as I said, we have to do it cost effectively. And that not only means buying things cost effectively, but keeping tabs on your expenditure. When we bought the property, we had an idea of what the refurb was going to cost us. We need to make sure we stick to that budget. Now, the way I do that, I have a spreadsheet. I break all the factors down, like plumbing, electrics, plastering, etc., joinery. And I break the initial cost down by trade. So I have a budget for how much these things are going to cost me. Then, as the costs come in, I keep a running total of all the actual costs, but I allocate each cost against one of those trade lines. So I'm always monitoring how much I've spent against what I've allowed on the budget. There may be times, unavoidably, you go over budget. But if I go over budget on that line, I'm then looking to try and pull it back on one of the other lines. I don't want to go over budget overall. So keeping to budget is making sure that your trades are working to the schedule of works, time's money, making sure that what you're buying cost effectively, and that you're keeping a track of everything. Because when you keep that track of everything, you know all along what kind of profit you're going to be making. And if there's anything unexpected, you can deal with it. You can factor something else in. Maybe something you were going to do that was a bit of a luxury, you pull back. So for instance, we're just doing a property now. Our ideal was that we were putting in wood doors, wood skirting, wood architrave, everything. Unfortunately, a bit of the bill cost went over budget. So now we've had to pull back. We can't go with that original plan, so we'll make no money. So now what we've done is stick with the wooden doors, because that still gives that wow factor, but we've changed the skirtings, the arches, etc., to just be the normal MDF that we can paint. It'll still look amazing, but we've saved about £1,000 by doing that. So always be flexible, always be moving, always be thinking about where you are cost-wise versus where you intended to be. Once we've done all this work and we've kept to our budget, we've now got a beautiful property that we are going to offer out to the market. We are going to find some excited buyers who want to come and buy your property. How do we attract them? Well, we've talked to the estate agent, you kind of factored in their costs, but what's going to make your property stand out? How are you going to pop? Well, you've done some amazing renovation, but sometimes people find it difficult imagining how they're going to live there. If you've done a bit of an open plan space, people can find it difficult to see how that will work for them. So the one thing that we always do is stage a property. Staging is, in the scheme of things, relatively new to the UK. It's been huge in America for a long time. If you look at any American housing programme, they all stage their properties. And the reason they do that is because it helps them sell. If you go and look at a house builder's development, they will always have a show home. And that show home will be furnished with ornaments and pictures. It will look like a home. And they do that because it helps them sell. People generally don't have imagination. They cannot visualise how something looks. So by employing a staging company, they will come in, they will rent you the furniture for usually about 6 to 8 weeks, put the furniture in, lay it all out, lay the space out, put all the decor. It will look like a show home. So now when you put it on Rightmove, your beautiful newly renovated property is furnished and looks gorgeous next to other developers' properties, which may be white walls, grey carpet, same old, same old. You stand out. When they come to view the property, They can now see how the space can be best used. It helps them fall in love with it. I would always stage a flip. It doesn't matter what standard of flip in terms of, are you doing first time buyer, are you doing the millionaire? I would always stage the flip because it gets you more viewings, it gets you more offers, it gets you higher offers because people can see so much better what their end product is. Now, the market might change between starting this project and where we are today. We might have an unforeseen event. Let's call it Liz Trustgate, where something comes and blows everything out of the water that we weren't expecting. Now, you're not going to get the price you expected. So what do? Well, rather than selling at a loss, can you keep the property? It's always good to have a second exit. If you can't sell, can you rent it? Now, we had a property, we'd done this bungalow, did it all up, looked gorgeous, was on the market, but we struggled to sell and we didn't know why. Then the penny dropped. We were also doing a barn conversion on the same site. Now, the bungalow completely separate, but because they could see this rickety old barn and nothing was happening at that point, they didn't want to buy the bungalow because they didn't know what was going to happen to the barn. They didn't know if there was going to be work going on, how intrusive that might be. So we couldn't sell it. And we got to a point when we were like, what do? It was difficult for us to rent it as a normal buy-to-let because of the price of that bungalow. We wouldn't really have got enough money back on the mortgage for that, the amount they would lend. We decided to make it serviced accommodation. So we remortgaged that property. We got a serviced accommodation mortgage on it, and now we rent it out by the night. So instead of the property standing there empty and costing us money, we now get an income off that property for all the people that come who want to see the beautiful Pennines and they want to rent it by the night. We had a backup strategy. For anything you do, it is always good to have a second exit. Conversely, you might do something as buy-to-let, and then for whatever reason you can't do that, you could flip it. Always think about two ways of doing things. The other thing is when you come to sell it, don't be greedy. The temptation is to love what we've done and think everybody's going to want to spend a huge amount of money on it because we love it, and we would. However, you are better selling it slightly cheaper, getting more viewings, getting more offers, and that way you can turn it around quicker. It costs to hold the property. Don't forget, you might have finance costs. You've got holding costs. The longer you hold the property, the more it costs you. You want to be in and out. The best flip we ever did in terms of in and out, we bought a property that we paid, it was a 2-bed terrace. I think we paid 70 grand for it. We got quite a good deal because the vendor wanted to get rid. We did a big refurb on it, 26 grand I think we paid for the refurb. But we bought that property on, I think we completed buying it on the 5th of February. We were literally 56 days doing the refurb, completely. That meant we rewired it, we put a new bathroom in, put a new kitchen in, decorated it, new carpets, moved the door into the bedroom so it made more sense, completely turned it round, did all the garden, 56 days. We were then doing viewings on that property at Easter, first week in April. Now when the estate agent came to view it, he was like, is this the same property? Which is always nice to hear. However, he was like, oh, the ceiling on this street is about 110. So we're like, no, it's going to go for more than that. We knew it was going to go for more than that. So we'd been looking about 130. Now we were like, we don't want to go in at our top level because we don't want it hanging around. Let's market it at 120. And that's what we did. So it went live on, I think it was a Friday, I think it was Good Friday. We had 10 viewings on Easter Sunday. Now, because it was Sunday, Steve and I did the viewings rather than the estate agents. We showed the people around. Out of those 10 viewings, 8 made offers over asking price. We had 2 people make offers just off the Rightmove pictures, again, over asking price. So we had offers up to £130,000, so 10 grand over what we'd listed it for. It's very hard having to make a decision on who can buy it, because especially when it's first time buyers, they're all desperate. So it had to be a very head decision on who we sold to. We could have gone to the highest price, but the people who had made the highest offer, one was a cash offer at 130, but they hadn't even viewed the property. The other was a first time buyer, but they were on a 90% mortgage. They only had 10% deposit. So there's an awful lot of things that can go wrong with that. If that property was downvalued at all by the lender, suddenly that buyer wouldn't be able to buy it. That's a bit risky from our point of view. We want it to move on. So we actually accepted an offer of 125,000, but the lady who bought it was also a first time buyer, but she had a 25% deposit, so she was only getting a 75% mortgage. She worked at a solicitor's, so she could move the conveyancing on. So everything worked towards it being the best possible deal. So when you're considering offers on your property, don't just look at the money. Look at the circumstances. Look at people's position and how quickly they can complete, how likely they are to complete, or are there any things that could go wrong down the line? Because you want it to be as quick and as smooth as possible, and that completion to go through. You want to be in and out. We completed on the sale of that property on the 2nd of June. So full time on that. We bought it. Ooh. We completed on the purchase 5th of February. We did the refurb, 56 days, and we completed on the sale on the 2nd of June. That's pretty quick. And that's what you're aiming for. In, do it, out, sold, got your money, move on, do another deal. I hope you got amazing value from this video, and now you can start your own journey on flipping property, because you now have seen and heard everything that you need to know. If you've got to the end and you like this video, put 56 days in the comments below, and like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.